Today I'm gonna run you guys through a service call. You'll see it out there in the field once in a while. We have a furnace that's putting air out of the vents, but it's not warm. I'm gonna think this one out loud for you guys. I'm gonna share with you a tip that really helped transform me from a service tech who was pretty good, but sometimes got fooled, and a technician who consistently found the right part to replace the first time. All right, so the first thing I'm doing here is I know I have a furnace, so I'm thinking about the sequence of operations, right? So I know one of the first steps in a call for heat is that the thermostat actually sends out the signal for a call for heat. So I'm just checking to make sure temperature's up high enough to activate that call for heat. It's not in a time delay or anything like that. And right now, everything looks good on the thermostat and the furnace should be running. Now I can sit here, I can open it up and start doing tests with the multimeter, but I learned about 90% of the time that's a waste of my time. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go down to the furnace. I'm going to see if it's throwing off any error codes. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look inside this peephole here, and there's two things I want to know. Number one, does this unit even have power to begin with? So I'm looking for any kind of lights whatsoever. And number two, if it does have power, is it giving me off an error code? Now I do hear the blower running at a very low idle speed right now, so I know power is not the problem. So I'm going to take a look and see what the error code is. So here's the look inside the peephole here. You see a steady red light. So that means the unit's got power. It's not giving me an error code right now, which is a little odd. And I know the blower motor is running at an idle speed. So since this thing isn't giving me an error code right now, what I'm going to try doing is I'm going to kill the power, turn it back on to clear the code and see what comes up. So it looks like it's giving me two blinks. So let's go ahead and open this thing up, see what that means, and start doing a little diagnostics. All right, so I have tape on the door switch. I have the power to the unit with the doors off. The two error codes, I looked at the code list here. It's giving me a pressure switch error code, which completely makes sense because if this inducer motor is not running, that switch will never close. So naturally, I'm going to get a pressure switch error code. So my first thought right now is I might have a problem with this inducer motor. But before I even dive into that, the tip I wanted to share with you guys today is that there's always a second reading you can take to verify everything. So initially, when I walked in, the first thing I did was check the thermostat, make sure it's actually calling for heat. So what I'm going to do now, before I start diving into inducer motors and pressure switches, I'm going to take a second reading that verifies that call for heat is actually making it to this board. And I'm going to do that by testing the W terminal to the C terminal to see if I have 24 volts there. And I'm reading 28 volts. So what I just did was I took a second reading that verifies my thermostat's not the problem. And so at this point, that inducer motor should be running. Now I can actually start seeing if I have power on this motor to begin with for it to actually run. So I have a point right here where I'm going to take one probe, put it on the hot wire, take the other probe and put it on the neutral, and I'm going to see what I have. And I'm reading 0 volts. Now what does this tell me? It tells me the control board is not sending out the 120 volts this motor needs to run, but it's receiving the call for heat from the thermostat. Now, a lot of techs, they'll think this is a bad board right here. But like I said, there's always a second reading you can take to verify everything. Now, here's the thing about control boards. They don't just blindly follow a sequence. They think through each step and make decisions. So what I need to find out right now, does this control board decided to send out voltage and it's just not making it, or has it decided not to do it because of another problem? Now, because I have a pressure switch error code, I'm just going to test across these leads on the pressure switch itself to see what position this switch is actually in. Now there's two ways to test this. Once again, there's two ways to verify everything. So I have both of my probes on each of the wires here, and I'm reading 0 volts across this switch. That's telling me the switch is closed. Another reading I could take to verify that is to go for one probe to common on the board, and I'm reading 28 volts there. Go from the other to the board, and I'm also reading 28 there as well. So I'm reading 0 volts across the switch when I use both. I'm reading 28 volts on both sides of the switch. I now verified I actually have a pressure switch that's stuck in the closed position. Now that pressure switch is the only way the control board knows whether or not this inducer motor is properly running or not. And like I said, the board doesn't just blindly follow a sequence. It actually thinks its way through. So right now, this control board knows it's not sending power out to run this motor, and yet the pressure switch is telling the board that this motor is actually running right now. The board knows that's not possible, and that's why it's sitting here doing nothing with the fan running on idle. The board knows there's a problem. And so the problem is not the board, it's the pressure switch. Now here's something I've done once in a while. It's kind of funny, but it works. My inducer motor is now running. My hot surface igniter is now glowing, and I should have flame any second now. So it looks like we might need a new pressure switch. Now, full disclosure here, the pressure switch error code I got did specifically say stuck closed. But if I told you that, you wouldn't have learned anything. And number two, not all furnaces are really that specific. Some of them will just give you a general pressure switch error code. But the important takeaway here is to always keep in the back of your head that there's two ways to verify everything. And the best part about knowing this is that if you don't actually know what that other thing is, you now know what it is you need to learn to become a more proficient technician.